Good evening. It's Wednesday, July 14th at 5:36. And this is the long-term recovery meeting. Members present: Granatowski, Burt, Bronk, Hedrick, Evan, Baumgartner, Harkin, Bordelon, and Patrick. First matter is number 3, approval of minutes, 2021-543, June 30th, 2021 special meeting minutes. This is on page 2 in your packet. Someone would like to move acceptance of the minutes?
I move to accept the minutes.
Moved by Bordelon and seconded by Evan. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? So moved unanimously.
Mayor, just to interrupt, now I think if I keep it this way, though, that's what's going to record is just this way. I hate to do that for recording. So
Whatever works.
if you see a hand go, happen to see a hand go up, let me know. I'm going to turn your heads here. We'll try this.
Okay.
Is it better to hear now?
Let's see. That's what she's saying.
Ms. Patrick, or is it okay to hear now?
I'm sorry.
Can you?
Ask her if she can hear when I'm talking now. No? Okay. Do you want to take the whole table down? Hear me out. Here. We're just gonna, so just bring on the chair in the middle. That's how we're sitting.
We're moving you around, Sheila.
No, they're not.
Is it any better?
Can you hear?
Any better?
Yeah, it's better.
All right, so we just approved the minutes, and we are on new business now, item 4, and we are on 2021-542 Unite CT update, and this was on page 7, and is Ms. Fondulis joining us?
She was invited, I asked her to wait, but I also got in the list.
Eyes are good, but they're not that good. I can see 2 people, and it looks like it's probably GMTV and Sierra. Yeah. Okay, so would you like to take us through the Unite CT information that Ms. Fondulis provided?
Actually, first page on page 8, the ICT, this is our local flyer for ICT that we have out there. This is on our website to put out on Facebook, all of those things. Just give some of the parameters of it. The rental assistance program supporting the residents who earn up to 80% of the HUD area median income and their landlords. And that is based on the household size, the income, there's an income guideline. There's a phone number there, and if anyone's watching, you come to our website, right on the main page, you go in for rental assistance help of our website. And then if you want to call 3ICT, you can call 844-864-1528. And then on to the second page is the official handout. So this one that we put out. Talks about rent or electric bills. It pays up to 6 months back rent, up to 3 additional months of rent going forward, up to $1,500 in electric bill assistance. The information on where to apply, there's some agencies that are involved in this. And then what we're hearing, the most difficult thing going on to page 10 is what to bring before not aware of what to bring. Documents need to apply. Tenants, there's some that the tenants have to bring, some that the landlords have to bring. Tenants, proof of identification, proof of income, copy of lease or rental agreement, proof of past due rent, proof of past due electric bill, and what to apply for. Proof of COVID-19 hardship. Now, if you don't know what they prove that, it's one thing you want to call out to determine what how to prove that. Landlords have to bring property information, tenant information, ID and W-9, copy of lease or rental agreement, proof of ownership of the building, copy of tenant statement of building and the And then if you, for instance, give out the number again, 844-864-8328. And you come to our website and go to that rental assistance page, news item on the main page, there's a link to go to the city website too, and there's some information there to talk to. So you can start with our human services or go right to the state website.
Excellent. It might be good if Mr. Greeley is able to do this while you're speaking when he does the video, if he could put these displays during the video. And then, you know, the link to the website or whatever. Yeah, that's an after fact when he's putting all the titles in and everything. But that sounds good. Do you have, Mr. Brown, did you have anything you wanted to add to this part?
I do not have
Thank you.
As a reminder, there's the new executive order that requires before eviction, that landlord has to apply for those, that funding now. So
We're not aware. Councilor Bordelon.
Yes, I just did a quick search before the meeting. I searched on our town, like Facebook and our human service page, as well as our Catholic library. It'd be great to put these documents on there. A lot of people use quick search engines versus going to the hard website. So just another recommendation would be to have these documents uploaded to the Groton Human Service page, as well as the Town of Groton Facebook page, maybe even the library page, since that's where people look for resources and ways to help. I think that would be a better service, just not on, a lot of people get bogged down by a town website. So putting those right on those feeds would be extremely helpful.
I thought is it not up there already?
it's a, go to our main page, it's a news item there, and then we put out our Facebook site. Then we'll,
Increase the services.
Yes.
Okay.
Renters? No?
And then that way it's shareable too.
Yeah.
People can start.
And the HS website does have this documents and everything, just not on Facebook. We said, you know, rental assistance or something.
When you can drop it in like the community forum or CT Connecticut or any other, like, you know.
Okay, anyone else on Unite CT?
Are we looking to have any help? I mean, it's one thing to say, here's what you need to bring, here's where you go. The next step is our town kind of takes an initiative and make sure we have people on staff on hand that can help folks navigate the system. Also, I do not, is it in dual language?
It is available, I've
Yeah.
seen it.
Yeah, we should also share it in dual language as well. But I think it would be really appropriate to consider making sure our staff, our town, has people on hand that know how to navigate this and can help a little bit more versus saying follow this link. So those are things I
Yeah,
would.
there is specific training for that.
Correct. So it's something to think about.
Yeah.
Thank you.
There might be something along with parent dollars too, is to have someone specialized in that on staff to be there for it.
It can be very helpful.
I just want to echo Councilor Bordelon because I was a little upset at our last meeting by the fact that it seemed like what the town was doing was kind of just referring anyone who was resident to other services in London or the state who are doing this. And I do think that, you know, it would be good to have some of the capacity to assist people in our own town and to have a much better kind of sense of the needs of our residents. So this is a really, from what, you know, we discussed this at the last meeting. My husband, again, you know, has been doing it, and he, you know, it is a burden to do this as a landlord. I can only imagine what it's like as a tenant. It's not an easy process. It's cumbersome, and there's not responsiveness in email because he says his tenant is trying to talk to the United CT people with some of the documents, and they don't seem to be receiving them. So then my husband's in the middle, and so there's not good communication. And so the more we can enhance that communication, the better. It's not a seamless process. It's fraught with problems. And these are the people who need this money and this help the most. And so we should really be assisting them with everything we have. And having dual languages, maybe even more than dual,
Yeah.
multiple languages, let's put it that way. Because in District 2 where I live, we have multiple languages.
Mayor Hendricks, did you have anything from the city?
No.
All right, Mr. Bird, is there anything else on Unite CT from Director Fundalos? Yes.
For Mayor Hendrick, is there any support or any initiative on the city side to maybe help with these programs?
We published this on Facebook and on the website. I did take a note, check to make sure we're dual language.
Yeah.
We have had mobile sites come down. We've had the van come down, and we had maybe 4 or 5 that actually showed up, and we had it advertised. We put it out on Facebook and on social media to get it out there. And we've also done it down at St. John's Christian Church, targeted Brantford Manor folks and Groton States folks. They needed it, and we can get them on.
Right. I think a great thing that Moderator Evans brought up, like her folks, her husband's tenants don't live in Brantford. So we got to widen our scope a little bit more. And I was just hoping maybe there could be some collaboration between the city and the town, since we could pool our resources and maybe have a way that we are working together to help build some reforms and a collaborative between our human service building, the municipal building over there, and really kind of come at it from a joint effort standpoint.
Well, like I said, we had it as this building, and then we took it to Brantford Manor, Groton States, because there was a recommendation about, hey, take it to that population. So we did. And if there's other sites that we need to do, we can talk to the United CT guys, and they have a mobile van, bus, take it different places.
And the town does serve the whole town. Our Human Services Department serves everybody in the town. So
Absolutely.
we would be working, Director Fundalos would be serving all the people from the Thames to the Mystic River.
I'm just saying,
Very good.
I was saying because the
All right.
city's getting funding as well as the town, so there could be some collaboration effort about that.
All right, we are on to 2021-2082. I'm sorry.
Just on the United States, Mayor, in terms of the ability for rock utilities to also collaborate with United CT or our effort to connect residents with the resources they need to pay, build, what the bills that they're behind on. What is the G's effort?
We've done that. We've reached out to people during the pandemic. We put a moratorium on cutoffs. We talked to people during the time every month.
Are the moratoriums still in place?
What's that?
Are those moratoriums still in place?
Nope, moratoriums are no longer in place. So what we've done is for people who were in arrears, every month we talk to them, and maybe even more often than every month, but I know every month when they start to send out shut-off notices, they talk to them and say, look, let's get a payment plan. Any payment plan is better than none. We don't want to cut you off. And so we've worked with TVCCA, we've worked with Unite CT to get those to coordinate with those guys. And we're doing everything that we can to keep the power on for everybody for as long as we can.
But nobody's being shut off.
I didn't say that. There
So
are
the
people,
moratorium is over right now,
the
correct?
moratorium is over. So there are people that if they have not paid their bills, we give them lots of opportunities to pay something, and they get a payment plan set up. And if they do nothing, we've had people with $3,000 bills, and so we end up having to turn them off. You turn them off, and they find some money, and then they get turned back on again. The thing is, if they would pay the money up front, then they wouldn't get one, get turned off. Two, they wouldn't get an additional fee for turning the power on. So this is throughout the entire service area.
So in the process of working with the customers who are in arrears, I'm assuming that you're making it known to them that Unite CT is available.
Absolutely. We've sent out stuff and bills. We've also worked with March Fondulis for people. We send people over in March, send them to TDCCA, and do everything we can to help people. And then when the wintertime comes in, there's a moratorium that automatically comes in because of the winter assistance. And we work with them to try to get fuel assistance. And that comes from TDCCA.
Very good. Councilor Bordelon.
Yeah. Is there any thought or direction with the funds from the state? And that was the collaborative effort that I was speaking of, because utilities is a town-wide issue. And with Branford Manor, that area, all their utilities are included in their fixed income. So that's one of the benefits of being in that. But the other folks in different areas that are struggling, like the tenants that Cinda spoke of from her husband, they would be struggling maybe to make the rent and also the utilities. So with the funding coming in, it would be interesting to see how we look and move towards, seeing a way or maybe creating a program. Some towns have created programs to internally with human services. So if our human services, the whole town and Groton Utilities is covered through the city, that's that collaboration piece that I was hoping that we can look to see what type of funding and assistance that we're going to provide to our community for people who are struggling with utility assistance and funding. And those are things and efforts I'd like to see to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, and that is the purpose of Unite CT, so that's great. So 2021-2082 ARPA funding allocation and distribution process. This begins on page 11, and I think that's what Ms. Harkin and Mr. Bronk are here for, correct?
Yes. Thank you. So we had numerous discussions and mentioned at the last meeting, we started to touch on the concept of needs assessment. And as time goes on, we're believing it as the most important step that can be taken. We're all hearing about needs. We're discussing that at every single meeting. Great ideas. However, we're having individual project requests that come in at this time, numerous different ideas, collaboration, programming. We're hearing a lot. And I think all of them are fair play. And probably most of them are eligible for the ARPA funding. Some of the general categories I've touched on this before, but deal with aid to small businesses, housing and homelessness, assistance, construction, infrastructure, school programs, and far more. Actually, the 150-page final rule from the feds provides wide latitude for the use of such funding. There are some exceptions, of course, but it offers more latitude than restrictions. Nonetheless, although $8.6 million plus the school funding seems like a lot, it probably will go pretty quick. And we need to use that money wisely. So back to where I started, needs assessment is going to be critical in moving this forward. We included this particular document within the body of the application agenda packet. And I don't necessarily actually have to put this together. That's great because again, one fell swoop basically gives an illustration of what needs to happen in our opinion. And the needs assessment would follow a clear understanding of what our process is and moving forward, how individual entities, this committee, the council, the staff, also the public, how that all is supposed to come together. In terms of the outreach, with the plan, it's not a silver bullet. We're not looking for survey money. We're not looking to do simply a community outreach tool. We're looking to use a variety of different mechanisms that come together basically in a multi-tiered fashion. So you'll note we have public meetings that we envision. We envision surveys. We envision using tools. We envision getting input from the public.
What are creative tools?
Those are yet to be defined.
I would prefer that we finish and then
Okay, I'm just, I didn't
make
know,
another
I thought that was,
question.
maybe it was had been
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I think it does, but I think as my point is that it's multi-tiered. It's not one specific silver bullet. But I think at the last committee meeting, there was a discussion that we should have some meetings. We should engage with the public. Someone actually suggested board to board. I think all of those are fair game. They all make sense. So I don't necessarily want to put my weight on any one particular tool because they all are important. The key takeaway is that we need a needs assessment. And it's that needs assessment, when completed, it's going to be defensible for us, for this committee, for decision makers, and also ultimately we have to respond to the state and federal government as to how we ultimately made the selection. So this particular image gives a description of how this might work. Now, the timeline is not necessarily envisioned. The timeline's not necessarily intended to be rigid. It's supposed to be flexible, but it's a relative timeline. And it talks about process development, needs assessment, phase one, also phase two. If you think of phase one, think in terms of buckets, where we want to make sure we are identifying appropriate categories. For example, we could have an infrastructure category. We could have social programming. You might have something dealing with housing. Those are just examples, but I think it's important to delineate these buckets and what we think about these buckets and what the community thinks about these buckets. They're probably buckets we haven't yet thought of, and we've got to get that feedback from the community to find out what they believe their greatest needs are. Once we get through that phase one, and of course we're having surveys, we're engaging with the public meetings, we then would move into more of a phase two development, dealing with specific projects. And again, we're already hearing some of these projects. Many of them are good. We're doing our best to tabulate, keep account of these that are coming forward, because we don't want to lose these ideas. But we don't want to do the projects before we know what the priorities are. We should do the priorities, then lead into the individual projects. Once we have a fairly good listing of these projects, there'll be further engagement from this committee, council, and others. So people can say, I really like this project. We can get some sense through consensus that it's a strong project. People believe it is great. Maybe these other projects are not as significant. Large. That ultimately will lead to final recommendations on these individual projects. Recommended, I believe, by this committee, ultimately by the town council, and of course, at the end of it. So I think that is the short version of what we are envisioning at this point. But I do want to give significant credit to Tabitha to help to try to capture all this. Have a lot of conversations, and I'd like to see if she has any comments on that.
I think we covered it. But I guess I would just say this will try to think of the funds because as a response to what we want stage at, and we want to give that to them. So that's people on the ground, maybe with iPads, maybe just post-it notes, open houses instead of traditional that kind of tier catch things into the passwords. People out of moment that want to make sure that we can activate it.
Mr. Burt, did you want to add anything? I had myself down to speak, and then Council Board would like to speak. My concern, and I appreciate the amount of thought that went into this. My concern is the time frame. The earliest that we would be actually getting money into the community, according to this, is January. And that troubles me a little bit if there are people out there that need our help right away, especially if we're looking at, maybe small businesses, restaurants that didn't qualify for some of the initial round of relief programs. If they're out there and they're still needing help, If we follow this extensive timeline, then they're going to have to make it through, a good chunk of non-tourist season, and before we would even be offering any help to them. So that's my first concern, is the time frame on that. The second thing is, it's kind of what Mr. Gronk was discussing as far as the idea of buckets. And I'm taking this mainly based on what I heard the Board of Ed is doing and what the Board of Ed has done. And they based it off of, I think, either State Department of Education or the Department of Education at the federal level, with this series of, and the term they use is buckets, where there are 5 categories where they are being guided to spend their money in those 5 categories. And then it is left to the board or the superintendent's office to decide how that money, they're apportioning it 20, 20, 20, 20, however many 20s I said, 5 20s. And then they are deciding how they're going to spend that 20% of money in that particular area. I would like for the town to do something similar, where we as a policymaking body, the council as a policymaking body, would say, these are the buckets that we think are important for the town. And then we would say, if it's 5 again, whatever, just divvy the money up and put the money out there, and then let the people with boots on the ground figure out which programs are the best programs. So maybe Marge, Mr. Director Fondulis, knows where they need to put the most money. Maybe it is that they need to hire a navigator in social services. So she could take that money, she could spend that money. Mr. Gronk in economic development, along with Ms. Patrick, could decide that, we need to get to those businesses that didn't qualify for the first round, and let's get them the money. And they know best how to do that. We don't necessarily know best as far as all the detailing, but I think our job would be to say, where do we think are the important sectors that need our help? And that's really how I think we could cut this timeline down, is for us to make that kind of policy decision about where we want the money to go. And then the people with the experience and knowledge to make it happen would be the ones then that would say, here's a program, can we go ahead? Here's a program, can we go ahead? So I think that would save a lot of the time here, so. Okay, Councilor Bordelon.
I just want to piggyback off that. The first thing I thought about the timeline, I think it's a great looking timeline, but I too agree that if I was a person waiting for services, next January would be, I might not make it. I might not be a resident of the town of Groton at that point, because I'd be put up in a shelter or somewhere else, wherever somebody could house me, since we do not have homeless services. And so I agree with the mayor on that. Looking at the services on this next CT, I think back to my first time doing the budget on the RTN and then on the council. Outside services is the line that we always spend the most time on. People roll their eyes. I constantly advocate for outside services, and yet here we are again. We send everybody to the outside services. That whole line item for, I don't know, 10 or 15 services on there, if I remember the number, is a total of maybe $85,000 tops. That is like pennies compared to what our budget is in our town. So what I would like to see as well, what the mayor said, I think we do need to narrow in what it is and where the pockets of money need to go and start getting relief out sooner. I think it's important to increase those lines in the coming years. From a town perspective, looking at those outside services, and people would roll their eyes and say, well, those are outside services. Well, we don't have anything in this town, so we refer everybody to outside services. And now outside services is getting a lot of attention, and it should. So maybe as a town, we could also maybe enact that we're going to double some of those outside services. We have some listed today in our packet. That's one way that we can give that relief directly, because we don't have the ability to care for our own in our town at a full capacity. I also think it's important to make sure we can say we do a survey. Look at Restler Homes for the Pratt building. A survey was done. It was if you look at the population of the town of 40,000, it was barely a certain percent. I forget the number. So how big is that survey going to be is my next question. We can survey, but I want to know what the percent, or are we going to stop at 500 increase or 400? What's our baseline? What's our number? I also think the fact that we use outside services as our driver, and we tell everybody to go across the bridge, go to, homeless and hospitality, and go to, United Community Family Services and all those other programs, we should actually invite them to a meeting and have a roundtable discussion with the outside services. anything to do with drug rehab, homelessness, any of those programs, and ask them where they are seeing the need. Our human services does a great job. It's a small entity of our town, but because we refer everything out, we might be missing something just from Mrs. Fondulis, no offense. So I feel that we should be bringing in the outside services at this meeting and having them sit here with us and tell us, what are you seeing? They can give us numbers like 10 people came from Groton. I helped a young lady over the weekend from Groton in Brantford Manor who was hungry. I called John. Unfortunately, there was nothing open. Unfortunately, she couldn't get food to the next day. And unfortunately, Human Services said, we have a lot of canned goods, but nothing that she could cook in a hotel. They didn't have microwavable items, things that we might want to consider funding. You know, we have all this money going into the food pantry, but we should start purchasing items that people that are living in a hotel for a short stay could cook, thinking outside the box. That was a need that I saw. So I think we should look towards, in our next couple meetings, bringing outside services in, letting them tell us what the need is, and collaborate from there. But I think this timeline can be condensed and should be condensed. And I think there would be a way to work, you know, collectively with the outside services, also bringing in the senior and elderly living that are also been hit hard by this, and really kind of speaking how that survey is going to look. That survey is great, but if it only targets the same 100 or 200 people, it really does not give us a good scope. So I'm curious to see how we can achieve that. But I think bringing outside services in and giving them the survey. If they have a Groton resident who comes to them with a need, they might say, could you fill out this survey for the Groton as well? So having that on hand. Thank you.
Moderator at the phone. John, you want to go? Sorry.
I just want to remind everyone, no matter what category, we take responsibility for tracking the entire application. We can't give like 25,000 to a group unless they do an application. We ensure that it meets the federal guidelines, or else we have to pay it back. So just keep that in mind. It's not being handed over or some without specific.
Right.
So just 25,000.
No, I'm just
No.
saying that was for example.
Oh,
Yeah.
I thought that was a really great idea of having these outside services come in and help with that needs assessment. So, I mean, I'm sorry that Director Fontulis isn't here because and that was a question, is who's involved in this lovely chart. I'm hoping she's going to be involved in the survey development and the needs assessment.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted to speak up on that.
Please.
Both of the points that within what I thought was best. First of all, in an emergency situation, that's intended for emergency.
Yeah, that was my next.
Because $8 million, you carve out some of that for and then also bringing people like housing services makes total sense. One of those public things that happened. And I would like to talk to Marge about how we do different surveys. We had a couple of seniors, and we have to reach out to them. So maybe go into the services and asking them. There's pockets of folks.
So that was my question. Is she going to be involved in that assessment then? Yeah, so she's part of this team. I'm sorry, I don't even know.
And you're part of this team too. So
Okay,
we're all part of this.
sorry. So my next thing I was going to say, which Tabitha, nice to meet you. I don't think I've met you before. Is so in my day job, I give out money. That's what I do. I'm a research coordinator. Most of it goes to scientific endeavors, but we do in the different processes that I administer. We have short-term turnover processes, which are called development or pilot grants. And I could see, and longer term, where you have a strategic plan, you have objectives you want to meet, which may be defined by this needs assessment, and then you're kind of developing programs with a longer view of the future. But to kind of address Mayor Granatowski and Councilor Bordelon's concerns about short-term needs, and I am aware because Councilor Bordelon did tell me about some of the issues at Brantford Manor where she had constituents reaching out to her. We could maybe develop a short-term process that might have a much easier application than Unite CT that might be kind of administered in-house, which could be done on a need-based basis. We could develop some criteria, obviously, just a way of kind of the way we have our development grants is it's a rolling basis, so it's not there are no deadlines. It's kind of addressed on a as needed basis, and then you address it. You have a defined pot of money. You wouldn't want to have endless money allocated to this, but you could address it and maybe regenerate that pot. But you could start that sooner in that time that you've One thing I just want to mention is like, I can't get any internet here. I don't know if there's internet.
Passwords town and Groton, all capitals for the first letter, so capital T town, capital. No
All right,
space.
sorry, but I was gonna say, internet. Might be good. Sorry.
Mr. Brock.
Yeah, a couple comments. I'll finish up on the last. I think when I think of categories and buckets, so actually the idea that we might need some money, we want to allocate money on a short-term basis for, let's say, a meet, that's a bucket. So I can see the town saying, yeah, we know we're going to have some infrastructure, we're going to have some education, some housing, social programming, those are buckets, but we have some needs today. That's a bucket. I think it makes sense to state that. And for whatever we think would be allowed in that bucket to do that, it's perfectly fine. And as is, the federal government's going to release funding to two different tranches. So we're not going to get 8.6, we're going to get half of that now because they don't want to spend it all at one time. They want a rational response to this, to be proactive. Second thing I want to say about the needs assessment survey. I'm hoping we're not going to get caught up in details of the survey because in essence, us receiving emails about I like this project, see someone on the street, hey, is there a possibility I can get this? We're all being surveyed. We're all part of a large survey. And it's not necessarily statistically valid by any given time. Council meetings, public meetings, it's a survey process. So we're not necessarily looking at one needs as an answer for all. We want to include all data from a larger surveying process in order to try to get our best estimate as to what truly needs. So I think the answer is multi-tiered. I said that before, but the more we do on multiple levels, the closer we're going to get to that.
How soon do you think we could set up the public meetings? You call them open houses, where we could have, and I think we should have them in a variety of places. We should have one maybe at the municipal building, one here, maybe at the library, wherever, just to hit different areas of the community. How soon could we make that happen, where we would just invite the public in and say, tell us, kind of like what we did with it was for Dr. Burroughs Farm. And there was one for plastics also, but we had storyboard, I don't know the correct terms, many people will know. We had like the storyboards up and stickers, and people went and they stickered what they thought the vision would be. Say again, sir? Yes, what they did. Right, how soon could we do something like that, or we could set up a series of these? I don't know if you're amenable to that, but I assume you would be.
Absolutely.
How soon could that happen?
So we might miss something that even think about it. So we can find it immediately. We use some labor, at least. I think it's a good idea to bring those outside agencies into the initial talk. Maybe at least get a little knowledge before the have the public service.
So I was looking at it as a way to enlighten us before we even went there.
Yeah, I just thought if you do that forward kind of sticker thing, I could sort of limit it to certain buckets all the day, which is I do come up with like this.
You could have blank ones, or people can create them, but it is very iterative, and maybe we need to just think of it, maybe we can have this meeting with the outside agencies and have multiple meetings with the public, so it can be more iterative. The Plan of Conservation and Development uses those approaches, and I think they're fabulous. But I also think they're limited to the people that are able to drive and come and not having childcare and the devoted evening to it. I'm a great fan of it, but I am obviously,
So virtual meeting or right.
Yeah, we've done similar things, and to address the things that you didn't think of, we had yellow stickies so that people could write their comments or their questions or their suggestions on a yellow sticky, and then that goes either on another board, and that way that gets collected. So, instead of us trying to come up with all the things we can think of and trying to guess what we don't know, you have just blank yellow stickies, it gives them an opportunity to put up things that they're thinking of, or things that directly impact them. And then that can be captured on the board.
Or you could refine it at each subsequent meeting where the first one, just, you might get 20 on one certain bucket, but someone might one of those things, it doesn't balance. However, you then see that idea for the next meeting. It could either be a new bucket, it could be like that here, it could be. Yeah.
And
Yeah,
so
revise
all
it.
the ideas, and then
Yeah.
combine
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
and then
And I think J-Lus did something similar where they had.
Yeah, it's
everybody
gonna
in
do
the
something,
meeting.
so.
Yeah, I think the first thing, I mean, we're all not experts, I know just in the medical, we're seeing a high risk of addiction. People that never had addiction problems, alcohol mainly, people were drinking heavily during COVID. There's nothing else to do. Package stores were open. People that had food insecurities, were worried, so all the addictions up. So that's just one thing that just has spiked. It's all of the things. That's just one need that's greater now than it was. It was already high, it's even higher. So I just think we need to just make sure, I think one of our meetings or brainstorm tonight of what outside agencies do we want to invite in and bring them in first and then take their ideas and then put those boards and then use the example that Mayor Hendrick suggested with the blank stickies as well. But I really think we should bring the experts in that field. I mean, in those areas first to come. That's the best approach, I think, is we want the expert here. We're not experts in food insecurity. Ledgely Health District, I sit on board there. I know people there that, where we talk about food insecurity in the area. They have a great collaborative meeting. Actually, I think from Parks and Rec, Jerry Larkin attends. We both be in the same meeting. They might be a big help, but I think we should bring all those agencies to us and pick their minds for what we're up for, because there's things we do not know that are coming because of the result of all of this.
So in terms of initial kind of there's like obviously churches, staff ourselves could submit some ideas, out there, for updates, but what else would we want?
I think a really good way to start would be to use the list that we're already contributing to as the starting point, because town staff has vetted those people for every year they have to apply and tell us why they need money. And then town staff decides, yes, that's a good cause. And then they bring it to the policymakers and the policymakers vote. So I think definitely all the people that we normally fund, granted, I understand it's a very low level, but those people should be our first ones that we're talking to. So for example, Safe Futures took a huge hit because things were really bad for people in situations and they had to leave and they didn't have the money. So, we already fund them. So let's bring them in. Let's bring in the hospitality center. Let's bring in, all the places we normally fund first and use that as the starting point. And then if anybody has ideas about other places that we want, you had just said Ledgely Health District, add them to the list. And then if there are other places that you feel particularly might benefit from being in on the ground floor, add them to it.
So do we send it an email that you recommend? Like, because I have a list of outside services. Should I just send
Just plain email reply to the agenda.
Okay. All right.
Mayor Hedrick?
We could also ask Director Pondulis who she outsources to, because that may give us an additional list. One of the challenges we may face is, for example, if we're talking about addictive services, who do you bring in? Right? Are you going to bring in everybody that does anything with addictive services? Or are you trying to get your arms around the magnitude of this so we can determine this is one of the buckets? Does that make sense?
We'll start with establish relationships first.
Right.
Right.
I think we have a representation of all the different ones. When you have homeless shelter representation, like Health District encompasses a lot. They do a lot of food insecurity and access to good healthcare. People are struggling with that as well. So I think we will hit, a big pot of folks.
And I think, we'll probably get an explanation for the meeting. I don't want to look like it's a budget meeting where, I want 75,000.
Right.
They talk first about what all the needs are. They might be turning away needs too, they talk about, but first the discussion, they'll still have a lot of education.
I would say include veterans groups. There's an entity that serves New London and Groton, and they usually meet in New London, but we have the coffee houses here in Groton. But it's one group that serves both communities. And Al Kinsall, I think, is involved, is he not?
Yes.
Alvin Kinsall, I'll know. But I think they should be included as well. But okay, so first step then at our next meeting, do we want to invite the organizations in?
Every 2 weeks, we'll kind of target.
Yeah.
Other schedules.
Yeah. So if we go to the beginning of August, because we're already halfway through July.
Well, so many entities, we want
I
to
know.
hold when people are, you know,
Would you-
maximize them.
I would wonder if we could have it as a virtual meeting. I don't think the hybrid meeting technology, I think we could get that technology there, but right now I don't think it would be there. So I think we would catch a lot more people if we did it all virtual. To tell you the truth, I'm still a little like hesitant about being in a room full of a lot of people.
Yeah, I don't like this setup.
Do you want to try for the 4th of August? Float that date and see if that works. I don't want to take the second Wednesday because I don't want to take moderator Evans RTM night again, because I know she's dying to have another meeting.
Last work ones for me, because it worked for other people here.
That's normally, I think, what oh no, we were meeting later.
John, are you able to do like we did last night, have the virtual screen up so people, we could have, that was a great way to kind of.
It was, you know, where we don't have this happening, you know, these type of meetings were never recorded, you know, we don't have staff. We had to have Sean for special, and it would make weeks and weeks to do that.
Yeah.
We do it on a one-time basis.
But if you do it virtually, you can share your screen.
That's why I like
and
virtual.
I just
you
think
can put it right out
there's
there.
even polling
Yeah,
information
pull
you
up,
can
yeah.
get. You can, you can.
Oh, we could do some surveys on that.
You can, I know that there's a poll anywhere thing you can do it.
Some people are okay at it.
Actually, you might get better turnout from the outside agencies if they can go with it.
So you just want to Zoom
March
on the 4th?
Zoom, right?
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so then, let me think. So then the other thing that I wanted to, I'm sorry. Do you have other stuff?
No,
My thing was there in the packet was a letter from Jim Butler.
yes. You want me to just quick say something about that?
Yes, please.
This was.
Page
discussed at-
13.
This was discussed at the last COG meeting. They're looking at, they want to hire kind of what we talked about, having a program, basically, help the coordinator. What they're looking at is, it's 130,000, I think they said a year. They want it for a minimum of 4 years. What they want to do is take 1% of each entity's ARPA dollars and then basically divide that for 4 years. So for us, it'd be about 14,000.
The county funds.
What's that?
The county funds. Yeah.
So, it'd be about 14,000 a year for us. Do that. However, they're not gonna do all our paperwork. That's the thing, is if we end up getting really, let's say we have tons of different, some pots and things, that's gonna require us to have our own. But they can help us initially weed out, is this likely to be eligible or not, that kind of thing. What's the latest thing? City stuff?
Well, I'm on the executive committee for this time. When it came to the executive board, and we recommended going to the whole council, to the whole COG to vote on it with the recommendation to accept. This person will help. I'm going to be bringing it to my council later at a CAL. We're going to be talking about the next CAL. But this individual is to help. Because right now, so we had a meeting and everybody said, okay, here's what we're thinking about doing. People were saying, okay, it went from, I don't know yet, because that's where I'm at. We're still trying to figure out all the rules. To other people actually said, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this. And other people said, well, wait a minute, the way I read this, you can't do that. And then somebody else will say, well, what if you do it this way? And the thing that we're all concerned about is not jumping. When I talked to my finance guy, he's concerned about going too fast, spending the money, and then the Fed saying, nope, you couldn't use it for that. Guess what? That comes out of your balance. So, and that's.
If you spend all that money, you're just paying it back.
Absolutely. So, that's one of the hammers I got hanging. And if you look at, I've been to something that Joe Courtney put out, I've been to something that Murphy put out, And it's like, well, you can kind of do this, kind of do that, but there's no specifics. And it's vague enough to where it's like, okay, what can we do, what can we not do? It almost looks like a free-for-all, but I don't think.
Tied into a COVID.
Absolutely, and it's all gonna be tied to COVID. And then the thing you gotta worry about that we kind of talked about last meeting was the funding. So you get funding this year, you get funding next year, you have 4 years total of spending, and then the money's gone. So if we start a new program or do something that needs maintenance down the road, you got to take that into account that that's going to increase our budgets, whatever our budgets is. And sometimes I know that councils out there have said, okay, we're going to go do this. And they didn't think about the long-term cost, right? They talked about, we get a grant. So we get a grant, we get to do this, so it's free money. And then the long-term cost of maintenance of that ends up being a challenge. But I'm going to be, like I said, I'm going to bring this to my council on the cow to talk about it. And I think we have a talk next week. So I'll just
my only concern I saw this is, first of all, it'll take some time for this college to approve it, but then are they going to do a full search process? That could be a lot of time.
Well, they are. If you look at the qualifications they're looking for,
They don't have like someone in mind or anything.
yeah, they're looking for a fairly senior individual. Well, you're right. I mean, it goes with cognition, and then the individual CEOs are going to have to go back to their selectmen or councils or wherever.
So I have a question and a comment for you. So your view, what I'm hearing from you is now
I'm not in support of it.
You're not in support of it?
We talked until then.
And then the other thing was the upside of it would be if, when we're looking at the regional agencies that we may be sending people to, this person might be a good one to coordinate New London, Ledger, Groton's efforts to help the Homeless Hospitality Center.
Right.
I could see them being valuable there, but everything else, we're going to count on Director Landry to make sure everything's in order. We're not going to necessarily trust someone that's looking at 20 different towns. So how much benefit is it to us? Flip side of that is, you say no to COG, then what? Are you right? So I don't know.
Well, and I think some of this is going to be discussed at the next meeting. And then we'll be able to get a feel from the other CEOs as to where they're going to go. I mean, one of the challenges is you want to be careful. There's always the worry about, are you going to be the donut hole? Everybody else is doing it and you're not. That doesn't mean you got to do what all the other kids are doing. But we need to evaluate, is this the right thing?
I think we'll find some back, but they're already somewhere so far ahead.
Yeah,
I'll
but
be surprised.
So my question, my thought to what Mayor Hendrick had stated about, obligations to different programs, and then your budget goes up later when the funds are out. I do agree with that, and I do think there is ways that you can bring in folks, and some of the things I'm reading, I'm just looking around in different states, they're also getting different funding under different ways that they're relief. And they're doing contract positions and things where they know that they're bringing in, I don't know, I'm going to say someone that's going to assist with these documents and programs. It's someone making $45,000 a year, and they're contracted for only 3 years. And at the end of that contract, they're done because the funding runs out in 4. So there's ways around kind of meeting the need and making sure, but also having a deadline because it is a contractual position or positions. My other question, though, was when do we have to determine by what date to get into that?
Because I have one.
Yeah.
Well, we talked about it again. Well, it sounds like we're going to at least get some initial thoughts on it. At the next one, next Wednesday.
It also seems within in-house, some places are training or bringing somebody on board who's counterbalancing, doing the checks and balances on top of their financial. We also want to overload our financial director who's doing everything else on top of it. Right. So they're bringing in a temporary part-time person helping allocate these funds. Also, some towns, what I read after looking at some of this and researching, they're actually just referring back to the state, so they have a point person who, okay, we're gonna allocate funds to this. And so they're doing the checks and balances by contacting the state and saying, here's what we're thinking of doing, and then they give the okay back. And they're keeping the timestamp receipts and timestamps and everything, and they have somebody overseeing that. With this amount of money, it would be appropriate and responsible and fiscally responsible to have people in place to handle this or come up with a program internal in-house. Also, like for the applications for people needing services. So there's ways in which we can do this. I think it's just cumbersome. That's 14,000. What would it look like on the other end? I'm not sure, but I think it would be important to look at that and see ways in which, and having somebody else who's just handling, you know, like you have a grant writer who does grant writing. This person would be helping.
In the finance department.
Right, there might be somebody else that you're gonna. Or you might say, you might divvy this up with your financial director and a few others. So it'd be interesting to see what other towns are doing and seeing how we can.
We have more information on it.
Right, I think we should wait and hear what you two report back
Because
on
we're
Bob.
leaning towards a recommendation.
The other thing is, there's 23 municipalities. How much attention are we gonna get from them? Like, we're not gonna be able to count on them to do a lot of detailed oversight. So we need our people looking at this money, especially since it is a lot of money. So it would almost be like, if we're gonna throw in 14, it's gonna be the kind of greater good kind of situation, rather than, yes, it's gonna be a great help to the town of Groton. Because I don't think we're gonna get a lot of attention to detail for our needs. Mr. Brown?
I just wanted to kind of reiterate that same point that months back, when the COG and other regional entities were putting their committees together, in all honesty, the local staff that went to those meetings were many years ahead of the staff. That's just the nature of it. Local government and regionals have 50,000. But we have discussed as this moves forward, we need for some local. I thought I brought it today. I printed out an RFP from North Haven. And every single day I'm seeing emails. Every municipality is asking the same types of questions. I saw one. Oh, you got it. I'm not going to go through it per se, but this is a contract position, North Haven, to another things are hiring full-time, part-time. Questions are coming up, like Wyndham today was asking if we do an infrastructure project, do we have to pay prevailing wage where the bidding? These details are going to really dominate us and help our interest as we move forward with these projects. We've got to have local expertise to help us move this forward. Last point I made is we're going to have fewer projects. There'll actually be less of a demand for help. My sense is we're probably going to have a variety of different allocations, which will increase the level of accountability and the state government.
So then, Mr. Burke, could you come back after consultation with your staff and recommend to, or make a preliminary recommendation to the committee next time we meet as to what department you feel would be most valuable to have going forward? So would it be good to have someone working directly with you? Would it be good to have someone working with Director Landry? Where will the most help be needed if we were to take on someone short-lived, right? Yeah. So if that, so we'll hear from you all as to the next steps from Bob.
Yeah, I'll send out some info right just so you can see what these notes and stuff.
Okay. And then would you be able to send that North Haven RFP to everybody on the committee?
Sure.
Okay, that way we can have eyes on that too, look at that. And then
There's a bunch of them online right now. If you Google any job thing, you can find all these contract positions right now for people hiring towns for these. That's the exact thing right now everywhere. Flooded.
so then what like our to-do list would be then, or those things. And then each of us individually, if you think of people that you would, or entities that you would foresee being part of our open houses, as Ms. Harkin said, start compiling that list and start sending it off. Do you want it to go to you?
I have just one question about that, because I was thinking while we were talking that there's kind of two tracks. One is like a kind of a, what I heard, what we were discussing is a social service bucket or, human needs. And then there's these small businesses. And I wonder if it's useful to have two different meetings that might accommodate those, because it might, I don't know if the chamber is like, or, the Mystic area business, I don't know. I know I was at a restaurant, it was actually in Stonington, but the woman who owned it was really complaining that she didn't get any funding and it had skipped over and they ran out. And there was a litany. And so I do think, I just don't know if it's good to have them all together. It might be cleaner to have two separate.
Outside agencies and then go to those business type.
Maybe use EDC. EDC, the people at EDC was? Yeah.
I think that in a certain role, the other thing I want to add, as you know, there's a lot. It's not just but the economic injury, state monies, and even sector now has I think a $2 million fund for local businesses. So sure, we want to know where there's a gap. What I heard is if we're going to allocate funding for small businesses, do it in a way that would help them. So maybe they got the money, maybe they have. We can get money for our solutions. We have so many businesses that aren't doing online marketing. I'm kind of hoping that when you a business, do it in a different way that hasn't already been done. That
Consortium should do stuff like that. See, right? For business, like we spoke about.
Yeah.
Some of the type of things we have to approach just our dialogue.
So then if we plan on at least two different initial layer open houses, one being kind of immediate human service needs, and then the second being small business needs.
I just had a question about the small business needs. I know at one point we had a database of all of our current small businesses still don't. So that was a concern. When we were trying to get information out with the plastic ordinance, one of our shortfalls was the fact that we did not have a database that really encompassed every business we have in the town of Groton. Are they IOB? What do they serve? What do they do? And so we don't have that. How are we going to make sure we don't have the same people coming around the table? How are we going to make sure that they all get the invite so they don't feel boxed out from this? Will this be in the paper? Will we put it up? I just want to make sure that all businesses have a fair shot.
Keep in mind that we do an online one, when it's 100 people, and the rest of the field.
Why wouldn't you know that though, if they pay business, if they pay property tax? Wouldn't you know that?
It's not the best content.
The weather.
It's not the best content. What we're really after is the primary individual with their email address, what they actually do as a business. Oftentimes, the email is provided to government per se is not a way to do that. Actually, it's a problem that most municipalities have. The state's aware of it. The databases for emails that government has.
We do put people sign up for this form. We had to turn out the business ones.
Yeah, that list is growing, but it's still a fraction of. Yeah, we would answer your question. We use Facebook, we use Explore more. We'll put it out in our newsletter. We'll do it in.
And I guess I don't want to turn anybody away. If you say we only hit for businesses a max of 100,
You tell them to register.
right? And then if we have to do two, then we do two. So let's make sure everyone, if we get a high turnout of 200 businesses, I just don't want anyone to line their
So we
service.
tell them this, can accommodate the first 100 this time.
Correct.
First 100 sign up, basically give us your name, so not
Correct.
first. Maybe go at 3 after that.
And I think-
100.
And I think it might be important, it might be important to even put something in the paper. I mean, a lot of people do, a lot of local businesses read the paper. If they don't, a lot of business owners don't live in the town and they read what's going on in the town, especially outside services. So it might be something that we are looking to see what our needs are in the town. That's what I say, it's not be money driven. Just we are collecting information and trying to get people around the table to assess the needs of our businesses and our constituents in our town. And these are the things that we're doing. It's actually good PR. It's good to put that out there that we're doing this. And I think we should just put something, in writing out, and even in maybe the Groton Times, or, really try to hit people that don't use social media, senior housing. They love the Groton Times because it comes free to their doorstep. So that would be something should go out. I think we really should be putting something out to Groton Times, and really, we do a lot on social media, but we miss like the 85 plus population, 75, who don't always use it. They rely on, I don't know how many.
Hard copy.
Yeah, I don't know how many folks who say that I love the Groton Times, and so.
Yeah, and I'd be happy to have an RTM meeting, that could encompass this if it was deemed useful. I don't know if it would be.
We'll just like work up the ideas and staff.
Okay, so then, yes.
I actually think both in the town, the city, I would suggest we get an agenda item. It's always public communication. We have an agenda item that says ARPA funding, business needs, those two C platforms to get some input as well. We're going to get some ideas from our city side.
Is that acceptable, Mayor Hedger?
Yes. Sherry, did you get that?
Ms.
I missed a little bit of the last part, but I've been keeping, yeah.
All right.
I listened like the last thing he said I missed.
All right, not a problem. I will talk to you and probably get you to give Paige a call tomorrow.
Absolutely.
All right, great. So it sounds like we have work to do, and we're waiting to hear back from on a couple different items. But do you want to just copy everybody on, if you're sending ideas out, send them to everybody, or funnel everything to you? Yeah, I think that would probably work.
Now, in terms of doing this for the first outreach, what would be that was doing like right away? So I need those, this week.
So if you start with the people that are in the budget, you already have their contact information. So then it'll really be just anybody additional.
See if they're available.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'd like to get them right out by Friday, if possible, Monday, Friday.
Right. Okay. That sounds good. All right.
Well, the only other thing I had mentioned about the MS4 at the last meeting,
Yes.
and I don't want, that's not really, it might be a bucket, environmental needs or capital improvement, or CIP type needs, but I wouldn't want to forget that.
Yeah, I discussed that.
I have that.
Yeah.
Infrastructure.
I've only had two projects that were presented that. One's about $400,000 worth of flooding of homes where 5 streets will be that. The other is about $4 million project. So it's out there. So he was only 2 weeks to come up with that.
What were your issues about MS4?
I just was hoping that to the extent that we have capital improvements or new MS4 needs, because there are new MS4 needs coming down, that we might be able, because I know at the last meeting, Mr. Frank said that was one of the fifth or fourth item that it could be used for. So I just, these capital improvements are big chunky objects in the budget. And to the extent that we can find another funding source and kind of meet our own needs with someone else's money, I thought would be a good use
But
for
you
it.
didn't have anything specific. You were just talking about MS4 as an infrastructure project and looking at that.
I actually had asked if there were, and they were supposed to be brought back at this meeting, but I just don't want it to be forgotten. I would love to know if we have needs from the city or the town.
Understand. I did both. She's our MS4 person. She's looking at projects for MS4 for stormwater drains and collection and GIS tracking and everything else.
So one of the things I know is it's now, I think towns are able to have a stormwater authority that is legislated. So I don't know what costs are involved in that, but measuring impervious surfaces, if there's going to be any kinds of fees that might be used to generate income on that. That's one way that sometimes they're dealing with the MS4. So I just thought I'd like to keep that in our mind.
Great. Is there anything else that you wanted to bring to our attention at this point? If not, we have work to do.
Just obviously, that is an eligible category. When we're gonna have lots of pilots. So I it's unfair for one category, unless it's an immediate need. I think we're gonna have so many.
I just wanted to not forgotten, because I asked for that, to know if we have that, you know, to my mind, I think what Mayor Hedrick said about investing in things that then you need to keep paying for them in the future. And this is an issue RTM has. It's why, you know, we vet the grants that the town receives, because, you know, we don't want to incur future costs for, you know, some upfront money. And we want to be aware of the cost we may be incurring. So I think things that are infrastructure oriented may be nice and finite to some extent. You may build it, and you know that may be the end of that investment. You know, so I don't want to forget about it.
All right. Well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. So Kevin, all those in favor of adjournment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstentions? So moved unanimously at 6:46 PM. We are adjourned. Thank you, Ms. Patrick, for joining us. Thank you, everybody, for coming out.